Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Minto Schneider. I'm the CEO of Explore Waterloo Region and Vice Chair of the Tourism Industry Association of Canada. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all land that I am on today. We extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land which each of us call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we are and can each, in our own way, try to move forward in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Thank you. We are looking forward to updating you on TIAC and DC's recent initiatives today. TIAC has been working diligently on the sector's behalf since the onset of the pandemic. We formed an industry recovery committee in early 2020 and have been working with this group of tourism leaders from across Canada from all sectors of the tourism industry. It was this group that developed our 2021 Tourism Recovery Plan, which we will take you through today. Recently, our efforts have been focused on ensuring MPs and senators have seen our recovery plan in advance of the upcoming federal budget, which will be announced on April the 19th. If you've not done so yet, please take a moment to go to tourismcounts.ca and send a letter in support to your MP. It takes only a few minutes. Enter your address and send. I know many of you are probably tired of the letter writing campaigns and want to see action, but that's what we're all hoping to do through United Voice prior to the budget, and we appreciate your support. As we know, 2021 will be a critical year for the restart of Canada's tourism economy. The visitor economy has given much to Canada: jobs, GDP, and a sense of cultural and national pride. Canada cannot afford to lose tourism. We need government support to ensure that we're still here to welcome guests tomorrow and in the years to come. We know that there's still much work to be done for our industry to recover and thrive through the post-COVID-19 era. We are very excited to have our new president and CEO, Beth Potter, on board to lead us through this effort for us. I am pleased to introduce Beth to start us off today with an introduction and update on our recent recovery efforts. Beth will then hand over the floor to Marsha Walden, President and CEO of Destination Canada, an important partner of ours, and we'll close today's webinar with a Q&A session facilitated by TIAC board member John Dunn. Thank you for your support. At TIAC, we continue to keep our foot on the gas and look forward, and we will get through this together. Over to you, Beth.
Thank you, Minto, and good morning and good afternoon. I am thrilled to be here with you and to start off this important discussion and strategic update from TIAC and DC. As the new president and CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of Canada and a longtime member of Canada's tourism family, I know how anxious you are about the current state of our industry and about how the future will unfold. If you don't know me, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was the head of the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, or TIO, since 2011. And I like to reflect that my first jobs, first as a student, were in tourism. I was a ride attendant at an amusement park, and my first job post-university was with the Royal Agricultural Winter Fair. Since then, I've invested time, energy, and passion into this industry. I've worked hard on the relationship between the provincial and national level. While I was at TIO, I actively participated in the Province and Territories Tourism Industry Association Committee, or the PTTIA, and chaired the committee for 2 years, which allowed me a seat at the TIAC board table. Since the onset of the pandemic, I have been at the forefront, advocating for tourism operators like yourselves with the provincial and federal governments. It was imperative that we secured financial support for you while you endured restrictions on your business and closed borders. I have also been working with the World Travel and Tourism Council, participating as a member of their COVID-19 task force for the past year. Why did I do this? Because I believed it was important to know what conversations were taking place at the global level, to be part of crafting the global message on behalf of the industry, messaging that would influence governments around the world. As we emerge from this pandemic and return to travel, it will be important that Canada's policies and processes around travel align with global initiatives to ensure a seamless experience for all travelers. But that is in the past, and I'm sure you're keen to know what I and the TIAC team have been up to in the last 4 weeks. I hit the ground running mid-March with TIAC's recovery efforts. In fact, since February, TIAC has met with over 100 individual MPs, outlining and discussing the needs of the sector and our 2021 tourism recovery plan. I have presented to a number of caucus groups of federal MPs and most recently appeared before the Standing Committee on Finance. We have also been vocal about industry-specific support in the media, and over the last few weeks, I have held interviews with media outlets from east to west, spreading our message to officials and the general public across the country. As your national voice for the industry, we send out weekly COVID updates that highlight many of these media segments and relevant government updates. I encourage you to sign up for these updates if you haven't already and follow along with us. As Minto mentioned, TIAC has been working with its Industry Recovery Committee to inform our recommendations since May of last year. This committee of tourism leaders encompasses representatives from across Canada and from all sectors of the tourism economy. We continue to meet on a regular basis to keep current as changes to our sector continue to change as we move through the different waves of this crisis. Prior to COVID-19, tourism was one of the fastest growing industries in the world, with 1 in every 10 jobs in Canada tied to business in our sector, employing more than 1.8 million Canadians. As we are all too aware, our businesses were the first hit by the pandemic, the hardest hit by closures, and will be the last to recover. With extended support, we can thrive and survive. Without it, Canada's tourism, culture, and hospitality industries will be devastated, as too will be our economy, impacting every corner of this great country. This is the message we are sharing with decision makers here in Ottawa and with opinion leaders across the country, along with our industry-developed solutions and recommendations. Our plan is available at tourismcounts.ca and was created to ensure the survival of Canada's tourism economy and global competitiveness as we plan for when restrictions are lifted. Our plan follows 3 themes: supporting business solvency, championing safety, and keeping Canada globally competitive, and follows the following 3 phases: response, recovery, and resilience. It is important to note that we work closely with our partners at Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, our ITAC, on the issue of Indigenous tourism operators disproportionately falling outside the criteria of government relief supports. To protect viable businesses in this emerging sector, it is vital that an Indigenous lens be placed on all recovery measures. Much of our recovery plan is focused on programs in play now that have been the lifelines to our sector, and our business solvency asks focus on the extension of wage and rent relief programs, continued support through the Regional Recovery and Relief Fund, and support for the aviation sector. We are asking for programs to go directly to those that need it the most and support the hardest hit businesses into recovery. We are also monitoring the situation and raising the alarm about those falling through the cracks. The HASCAP program was a win for the sector, and TIAC was successful in advocating for a February 2021 implementation. Our thanks to all of you who have filled out the HASCAP survey, letting us know who have or plan on applying for the program. We continue to work with BDC to relay industry feedback to make improvements where needed. And I want to stress that we want to hear from you, our members and industry groups on the ground. If you are experiencing challenges with any of these programs, we need to hear from you to inform our recommendations and messaging on what is working best for our businesses. The RRF has been helpful to the sector, and we have identified a few gaps that we are asking the government to address, such as prioritizing tourism stakeholders and being made available on a per property basis. TIAC recently participated in a press event with the Coalition of Hardest Hit Businesses, calling on the federal government to provide certainty and announce an extension of the wage subsidy, CEWS, and the rent subsidy, SERS, to support programs to the end of the year for the hardest hit sectors. I want to thank those who participated in this survey. It will be essential to target the CEWS program to businesses in sectors like tourism beyond the summer and hold or increase the subsidy amount. We have also been advocating to see modifications to support seasonal businesses that have no revenue in certain periods of the year, but continue to have staff. On the rent subsidy, we have businesses that are essentially closed, but have offered essential services and now find themselves without access to the top-up funding. We are asking for this to be addressed and the program to be extended to the end of the year. Support for the aviation sector is critical for recovery. Every route lost or plane grounded will delay recovery. Now, we know discussions are underway, but we have been avidly asking the federal government to provide immediate liquidity for the aviation sector and support carriers, airports, and service providers. Without support for the air sector and access to liquidity to stay on top of fixed costs, the sector's recovery will be prolonged and Canada may lose its global competitiveness. Under our championing safety measures section, we want to be clear that tourism stakeholders have a shared commitment on keeping Canadians safe. We are asking the government for a plan or conditions for reopening interprovincial and international borders, and believe that the government can provide guidance on this coordination. It is important for our members to have time to plan, to prepare for reopening, to ramp up operations, to hire back staff, and to communicate with their clients. Uncertainty is not a plan that ensures a successful recovery. Countries around the world have amended their approach to quarantine using evidence-based data that supports a reduced quarantine and increased testing regime as a more effective way to protect populations. We believe that Canada needs to rethink quarantine rules and invest in rapid testing and contact tracing. We believe that Canada needs to function under a united travel approach, i.e. one travel policy for the country, as opposed to 13 individual policies. We know that people will travel again. We want to ensure that we have the roadmap in place to allow for Canada to regain its momentum and competitiveness on a global scale. To do so, we have asked for the following. Canadians normally spend on travel abroad more than international visitors spend in Canada. With the lack of travel in 2020, there is an opportunity to inject some of this spending into Canada. Converting just 10 to 12% of these Canadian expenditures could net an additional $4 to $5 billion over and above inter and intra-provincial spend. Canada needs to support stakeholders to market domestic and local tourism options, keeping in mind that domestic travel is a key first step, but will not bring the industry back to full scale without international revenue. Targeted supports are needed for tourism businesses to ensure they are around when the time comes that the border restrictions are lifted. And thus, we are asking the government to top up funding for Destination Canada to keep Canadian destinations top of mind, to support destination marketing organizations, and to entice the return of high-value travelers. In addition to the recommendations on liquidity and improving current support programs to include the hardest hit sector, we are also asking for a tax incentive for Canadians for 2021 and 2022 to encourage local travel or travel within Canada, and the reintroduction of the federally funded Marquee Tourism Events Program. the development of a business event and urban recovery funding program, and the reinstatement of the visitor GST rebate program for international visitors. And finally, support for the tourism labor market and capacity building projects. Canadians want to travel. Health and safety is, of course, a key consideration, but when restrictions are lifted, there will be a high interest. It is important that the industry be able to offer services for these domestic visitors. So we are asking for support to allow the sectors to survive and regain competitiveness on the global scale through and following this pandemic. Canada's tourism sector was the first hit, the hardest hit, and will be the last to recover. Understanding the fluidity of the situation and that we will need to adapt, we are asking for commitments. TIAC and the members of our recovery committee are always available to connect with you to expand on any of our asks. Now, before I close, I want to encourage you once again to visit our site at tourismcounts.ca to send your letter to your MP. And if you are not a TIAC member, I invite you to join today. As a not-for-profit organization, our advocacy efforts on your behalf rely on the support and investment of our members. So please join your peers across the country in fueling the work we are doing today, tomorrow, and in the future for your survival and your recovery. Our success begins with your support. In addition to the benefits of our advocacy effort, by joining TIAC, you will enjoy access to a wide range of benefits, including our members-only webinars. Our next one is coming up on April 20th, where I will give members an overview of the impact of the federal budget tabled the day before and how it will impact the work ahead. I want to thank you for your time and attention today. I look forward to the question and answer section of our program coming up shortly. And I'm now pleased to hand over the floor to Marsha Walden, President and CEO of Destination Canada. Marsha?
Thank you very much, Beth, and congratulations on your recent appointment. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Je suis heureuse d'être ici aujourd'hui et j'apprécie l'occasion qui m'est donnée de partager avec vous quelques mises à jour importantes. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from Vancouver, not from Ottawa. And this is the traditional home of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. So as much as this is a time of great challenge, of course, for our sector today, it comes with an even greater responsibility to support tourism's recovery and resilience tomorrow. And leading up to COVID, the world was experiencing, of course, very strong and sustained global growth in tourism. But there were some early signs that what we had was an unsustainable business model. And Canada's visitor economy was growing, but challenges were emerging. And some of those included an uneven distribution of benefits around the country, difficulty accessing capital for development, growing issues in attracting and retaining labor, questions arising around environmental sustainability, some tenuous social license in some of our local communities and with local residents there. And I would say an insufficient integration of strategy within the tourism ecosystem. So a very buoyant market, but less than perfect, to be sure. And for several years, that idea of transformational travel was on everyone's radar in our industry. And there appeared to be growing demand for products that aligned with travelers' social values. Some destinations were very early movers in this space and adopted a much more balanced destination management approach to growing the market. And then came the global pandemic, forcing all of us to reassess everything we thought we could count on. Now, we know how terribly difficult this past year has been for tourism businesses right across our country. But one strength that has served us well during the first year of the pandemic is the strong relationships that we already have in place with industry partners. Destination Canada and TIAC have worked together for many years under the One Canada Agreement, for instance. And together, we have evolved critical industry initiatives like Rendezvous Canada, Go Media, the China Market Readiness Initiative, and Industry Town Hall series that many of you may have attended. And I certainly look forward to working closely with Beth and her team to advance this collaborative work and other initiatives that will help bolster our industry in the years to come. And make no mistake, we've got a very big job to do, as we all know well. Today, we truly are in uncharted waters, as they say, and the seas are extremely rough. Each of us is in a different boat as we see thousands of individual businesses grappling with different ways that the pandemic has affected them. And our job together is to navigate a way forward, one that helps us survive today and to truly realize our full potential as an industry of Canada's new economy in the future. So today I'll touch on 3 phases of the recovery process across 3 time horizons: surviving the pandemic and the related restrictions that are still facing us, reviving market revenue and the promise of growth and opportunity for the future, and of course, beginning to thrive again and increasing the vitality of our industry so that we can deliver net benefits to communities and long-term resilience for our businesses. But let's just stop for a moment and have a quick look at where we are and the condition of the sector right now. The combined impacts of the global pandemic have actually wiped out 35 years of growth. It's worse than all previous shocks combined, as I'm sure you're aware, and that includes SARS, 9/11, and the global economic crisis combined. And along with most forecasters, Destination Canada anticipates that a full recovery will take years. To get back to 2019 levels, we currently estimate could take until 2025 without significant interventions or changes in the trajectory of our current market. As you know, many tourism businesses either did not open at all in 2020 or went out of business entirely or tried to limp along on very low revenues. And as we've heard many times, and just again from Beth, tourism was hit first, hit hardest, and will be the last to recover. And I think that message is resonating in all halls of government now and is truly and fully understood by all. The pandemic's impact on tourism has clearly been much worse than any other sector in our economy. And tourism unemployment remains double the rest of the economy. And in particular, we've seen women, youth, new Canadians, and Indigenous workers extremely hard hit. So the summer of 2021 couldn't be more critical. Without a fighting chance to drive revenue, we anticipate that much of the tourism supply chain will be severely damaged or broken, making recovery even more difficult for those left standing. Importantly, Canadians do appreciate the value of tourism to the economy as well as to their own personal lives in traveling. And governments at every level have been providing relief at a scale and speed that has never been seen before in times of peace. A dizzying array, I would say, of broad-reaching federal, provincial, and municipal relief programs have been a significant backstop for Canadians and for most businesses. Now, we know that some critical gaps do still exist, and those are being addressed over time. But looking ahead, I think we can see that there are some leading indicators of future demand that are pointing in a very positive direction, carrying the prospect of a revival of market-driven revenue once restrictions are lifted. No doubt, as we see right at the moment in some provinces, there will be some significant bumps along the way and a few steps backward, which are hard to take, and I can appreciate the feelings in Ontario right now. As we saw last year, market openings are expected to begin very close to home and expand from there. Unfortunately, 80% of Canadians say they plan to travel when restrictions are relaxed. But as we know, and as Beth referenced, Canada does have a huge travel deficit, and there is pent-up demand for both domestic and international travel. So capturing a good portion of that typical outbound travel can have a very positive impact on the fortunes of our industry. In fact, if Canadians spent just 2/3 of their typical outbound travel budget in Canada rather than internationally in 2021, it can speed our industry's recovery by a year. In the short term, Destination Canada's marketing plans are designed to channel that demand to destinations all across Canada, particularly to our hardest hit urban centres that form the gateways to tourism for our entire country. Of course, as you might expect, our messaging and our approach has to align with the evolution of health regulations and other restrictions. So we've developed a multi-phased approach, which I would say is on a bit of a slide rule as we watch for signals and sentiments and directions from our governments as to what is appropriate at different times. Right now, we're still in the influence phase, and we're reminding Canadians of the value of tourism in their communities and urging them to travel in Canada this year. As conditions improve, we'll be inspiring Canadians to plan their Canada vacations, to really get into the nitty-gritty of planning and helping them rebuild their confidence in travel. Once restrictions are lifted, we'll be able to convince Canadians to travel and book now beyond their backyards and close to home communities. We know pretty much that those early travelers are likely to be initially visiting friends and family, but that can have a significant impact on the confidence of all Canadians by social sharing through their peer-to-peer advocacy and demonstrating the confidence that other Canadians can have in traveling again. Because seeing your friends and family traveling and gaining more information about what it's like out there and what the new hygiene protocols are like is a very powerful confidence builder. And all of us really need to leverage and amplify that kind of social sharing once it starts. So here's one example of our work during this influence phase, which has been in market for several months already. We've been helping Canadians understand the value of tourism in their communities and how tourism contributes to our quality of life as Canadians. We need Canadians to once again be willing to host visitors, to feel ready to welcome them, and to be the welcoming country we've always been, and to begin to think of travel again beyond their immediate backyards once restrictions are lifted. We've used a combination of both inspiration and I would say moral suasion to say that tourism is the heartbeat of Canada. And we've profiled people in both expected and unexpected roles so that Canadians truly learn how tourism is part of the daily rhythm and lifeblood of their communities, the heartbeat. Destination Canada has also supported a major media outreach that was timed to coincide with last month's 1-year anniversary of the WHO declaring COVID a global health pandemic. We released a fairly stunning research report called Revisiting Tourism, Canada's Visitor Economy 1 year into the global pandemic. And the findings in that report have since been covered in over 1,700 media stories nationwide, and the report itself was downloaded 700 times in the first week. So it's had a significant impact, and it was a critical opportunity for us as an organization and all of our partners across the country to talk about the critical role of tourism in our economy, in our communities, and the difference and impact that Canadians can make by choosing to travel in Canada this year. So I encourage you to read the report, which can be found on our website alongside 134 others all of which I think you'll find of value. Now, these foundational messages really are helping us set the stage for Canadians to travel in Canada. And in 2021, Destination Canada will make its largest ever investment in domestic tourism marketing to motivate interprovincial travel by Canadians. We'll be focusing on interprovincial travel, and we're working with our provinces, territories, and cities to make sure that we have an integrated program that helps drive revenue the minute restrictions are lifted. And their purview, of course, will be on intra-provincial travel for the most part. And we can do that by pointedly asking Canadians to dream and plan their Canadian vacation now. We'll be asking them, where will you go first? We know that dreaming is one of the most important aspects of travel. It's part of the voyage. And uncertainty and fear have really postponed our dreams in a terrible way this past year. So we can relift people up again by getting them dreaming and getting them doing some detailed planning again. And we want to show Canadians that all their travel aspirations can and should be fulfilled right here in Canada. We'll kick things off by asking our highly engaged social community across the country to share their bucket list Canadian destinations, the places they want to go first when they're able, and to inspire other travelers right across our nation. We will target national, regional, and local columnists, morning shows, news and influencers, and other celebrities to ask themselves and their viewers, where will you go first? And we want to turn this question into a national conversation, not just a media campaign. Many of you will be able to dial into this and help support that. Now, looking internationally, we've worked with our North Star partners right across the nation to revamp our strategy and define new ways to collaborate and to better compete for travelers in what will be a very ferocious new global landscape that we'll be re-entering together. We've continued to cultivate and protect our overseas trade and media relationships throughout this pandemic, both for leisure travel and for business events. And beginning in May, we'll be going back into international markets in new ways that will help us compete better in a very noisy marketplace. Our largest investments will be into the United States, which of course is our #1 international market for Canada as a whole. It's about 10 times larger than any other international source market. And we will be readying our international visitors to put Canada on their list once again. Destination Canada is also working very, very closely with Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, which represents an extremely diverse cross-section of Indigenous products and experiences, from wildlife viewing to culinary to outfitting to lodging and so much more. And we're working together to ensure that we're elevating Indigenous experiences as one of the most unique and compelling aspects of Canada's value proposition for both domestic and global travelers. Finally, what will it really take for the visitor economy across Canada to thrive over the longer term, to become a better global competitor, and to create what is truly sustainable growth? Well, we believe it begins with a new North Star that we're preparing for now, while we also rekindle recovery in the immediate term. And that new North Star is one that orients us towards why our corporation exists in the first place. Our aspiration is to enhance the quality of life of Canadians and enrich the lives of visitors. And together with industry, we enable Canadian culture to thrive, and we enable place-based regenerative economies to emerge through travel and hospitality done exceptionally well. Now, getting there begins with a new way of thinking about the growth and development of our industry, a much more holistic view of how we work. We understand that the visitor economy is complex and it's a continuously adapting living system, really. And that's true whether one is working at the level of a single neighborhood, a mega cluster of tourism product, the entire country, or even beyond. We'll be guided in future by regenerative principles drawn from leading thinkers around the world, from Indigenous peoples, and from the early learnings of other destinations that are on this path. We'll elevate the role of communities, rebalancing that relationship between Canada's communities, governments, and markets, and helping to create, as they say, the fertile conditions for our industry to thrive. Our strategy is focused on just that, and we'll be using a new yardstick for Canadians' tourism industry, one that measures whether tourism is creating true net benefits for our country, economically, socioculturally, and environmentally. As we rebuild our industry, we're focused on 4 strategic pillars that will enable us to compete more effectively and to win the customers we want. Building on the existing strengths we have in marketing and research, we're carving out a new strategic role in destination development. We're working collaboratively with other organizations at every level of the tourism ecosystem, public, private, not-for-profit, as well as many parts of government and the federal family to elevate Canada's competitiveness as a tourism destination and to cultivate those fertile conditions for destinations to thrive. We need to ensure that tourism is always giving more than it's taking from our communities and continues to build its social license with Canadians in the future. To come on this journey with us, please stay connected. We have multiple ways to engage and for you to get information, and here are just a few. Je vous encourage à rester connecté avec nous sur nos canaux de communication. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. And back to you, I think, John.
All right. Merci beaucoup, Marsha et Beth. Ça a été vraiment des très bonnes présentations. Hi, everybody. My name is John Dunn. I'm the president and founder of Floor 13 and a proud member of the board of TIAC. Premièrement, j'aimerais reconnaître les territoires traditionnels autochtones où je suis aujourd'hui, d'Abenaki, Odanak et Wolanak. Alors, merci de nous avoir joints aussi aujourd'hui. On a au-dessus de 800 personnes à travers le pays. Nous avons reçu énormément de questions à l'avance. Ça fait que nous allons passer quelques-unes de ceux-là avant et après tomber dans les questions du monde qui sont sur l'appel aujourd'hui. N'hésitez pas à écrire vos questions en français et ça va me faire plaisir de les traduire pour nos 2 panélistes. As I said, we've had a significant number of questions that came in beforehand, so we're going to deal with a few of those, and then we'll go to some live questions as well. So please use the Q&A chat button to send your questions in. We'll try to get to as many as possible, but if we don't get to them, please send in through email to communications@TIAC-AITC.ca, and we'll make sure to follow up and get back to you in a timely way. So let's get the questions going. Beth, I'm going to start with you. You know, obviously vaccines, the cornerstone of getting our economy and our tourism economy back on track. We're seeing some vaccination protocols that are coming out of proof of vaccine through the world. IATA's got a program. The EU's thinking of a digital green pass program. What is TIAC's position on the proof of vaccine, and how are your conversations internationally with like-minded organizations been going? And are you getting any positive signs from our government as to some sort of proof of vaccination?
That's a great question, John. So first and foremost, I'll say that we believe that proof of vaccination should become a common part of a traveler's travel documents moving forward. And we are recommending that Canada adopt this. There is already a system in place that is being used by airlines and by border officials around the world to validating either proof of vaccination or proof of visas. And so we'd like to piggyback. We think that the best way is to piggyback on a system that's already there. And so we've been, talking to people about what the solutions look like to implement this. And certainly we are learning from our colleagues in other jurisdictions. So we've been facilitating conversations with the federal government. As I said, we've been at the table with other countries around the world because we want to make sure that what Canada's solution looks like fits in with everybody else. So you heard me mention earlier that seamless traveler experience, and that's going to be really important. But the one thing too that we also that we also need to understand is that not everybody will get vaccinated. If we open the borders today, a family with young children, parents might be vaccinated, children won't be because we don't have vaccinations for young people yet. And so we're going to need a way for those who aren't vaccinated to travel as well. And really a rigorous testing regime and contact tracing are the two solutions that seem to make the most amount of sense, that don't overly complicate the process, and that are easily accessible and attainable by travelers of all sorts, whether it's leisure or business and otherwise.
Great. All right. So I've got a question for both of you, and maybe Marsha, you can take a kick at the can first, and it's the $105 billion question. What is DC's perception on when international travel will come back to Canada and we'll be able to see a return to 2019 levels?
Well, I wish I had the crystal ball that would define exactly when those borders will reopen. But like all of you on the call, I have the same information you have as to the deliberations inside government. What I can say is, based on our best guess around when those borders may open, returning to 2019 levels, as I said, is most likely not going to happen until about 2025. It will take years. But Canadians can have a tremendous impact on that, as I said. If Canadians do choose to spend at least 2/3 of their normal outbound budget in Canada, they can accelerate recovery just in this year alone by an additional year, taking us to 2024. So, those Canadian dollars matter a lot. And the more that we can convince Canadians that all their aspirations can be fulfilled in Canada, the better and faster that recovery will be.
Beth, any thoughts on that as well, or?
Yeah, again, my crystal ball is broken, but here's what I think. There's a couple of things that need to happen in order for us to begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel. One is, to Marsha's point, we need to get Canadians moving around the country. And that's going to come as Canadians gain more confidence in feeling safe to travel, and residents feel more comfortable welcoming people into their communities. And so that can be driven, government, the federal government can take a leadership role in that, but as we can in industry as well, by talking about all of the great things that our industry is doing to ensure health and hygiene protocols being met and providing environments that will mitigate the spread of the virus. Every one of the business operators that are on this call today have invested money into implementing protocols, and they've changed the way their businesses operate, whether it's closing aisles in their venue, whether it's training staff, providing PPE, all of those things. The investment's been made by our industry, and it falls right in line with what our industry has always been about, and that is providing a healthy and safe environment for their guests. On the other side of it, we also need time to plan. And so this is the conversation we are having with government. And we're saying, listen, we see the vaccine rollouts are happening. They're picking up steam. We're seeing more jabs in arms. So let's draw a line in the sand. Let's pick a date. If all Canadians are going to have at least one vaccine by June. Let's look at a summer date. If all vaccines, everyone's going to have there are 2 vaccinations by September, then let's pick a fall date. But let's pick a date so that businesses can plan to open. We're not an industry that can turn on at a dime. We have to ramp up. We've got to rehire 500,000 people. We need to communicate with our clients and our guests to say, hey, we're open. Here's what you can expect, because we've had to change the way we do business a little bit, whether it's time ticket entry or advanced reservations or what have you. So really those 2 things are really important. We need time to plan. So let's get a date, a line in the sand, and move towards that. And let's communicate more positively to Canadians that it's okay to travel.
Yeah, and I think it's important. That's a great point, Beth. And I think it's important for all of us on this call to talk to our local politicians, whether they're at the municipal, provincial, or federal level, to really put out that positive message that it's actually never been so safe to be in a plane, be in a hotel, be in a restaurant. They've never been cleaner, safer. The whole industry, as you said, has invested millions of dollars trying to, get that to a point where we're so squeaky clean that, it's time to go out. So yeah, great point. Marsha, what can DMOs do to be more effective, to plug into the sort of the national efforts that are being done outside of what's being done on an advocacy side of things, but really to able to share communication tools with their members, with their local politicians, with the citizenry in more maybe rural communities that maybe don't have that same tourism aspect that citizens in Vancouver or Toronto would have?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's lots of ways, certainly, that I know many DMOs have been devastated because they're reliant upon hotel revenues for their source of funds, and so they're down a lot of people and certainly down resources in terms of trying to re-stimulate interest in their communities. But there are some significant tools that are available through Destination Canada, huge content reservoirs that are fully accessible to industry, a major research library, if you will, that will help you better plan and find the markets that are first to return and help you understand that. I would say most DMOs would be able to quite readily pick up and amplify the key themes that they see coming from us through their social and local media contacts through Earned. I'd say, TIAC and DC have made it extremely affordable this year for anyone to participate in Rendezvous Canada. We expect a banner year in terms of participation, both from international buyers as well as local sellers. So avail yourselves of that opportunity to be present and to be selling your product for future travel. And I think, what's not, last year, as many DMOs will recall, we invested about $30 million that was matched by provinces and territories to help support very hyper-local marketing. Only about half of that was spent in 2020. So there's still collectively another $30 million that should be available for more regionalized marketing activities. So that should help support DMOs as well. So a bit of a laundry list there, but hopefully there will be something in there for DMOs to latch on to.
Sure, and just to reiterate, people, you've got to get out there, look at both those, the Destination Canada site, the TIAC site, all the information's there. There's a bunch of great information and stuff you can share with members of your community and your industry. Beth, the budget's coming out April 19th. We've been working super hard trying to get our voices heard on the Parliament Hill. What's TIAC's vision post this budget for Q3 and Q4 of this year? What are you looking for? What are your predictions?
Well, first and foremost, and there was a question in the Q&A about the SUS and the SIRS program. We originally, when we first created our set of recommendations, and released them back in January, times were different. And we asked for an extension to the end of the summer. We have since revised that request, and we have full on asked for an extension of those two programs specifically to the end of the calendar year, because we know that the recovery is not going to take place or begin as soon as we thought it was going to. So we'll stay on top of those things, and we want to make sure that we continue to understand, as each wave of this crisis hits us, we want to make sure that we are understanding and communicating with all of the businesses in the industry to know how it's impacting them. And I know that these kinds of programs, don't help with your mental health. They don't help with the fact that that you've seen an increase in debt load. They don't help with those things. And so we will continue to focus on how do we get the board, how do we get the resumption of travel started again here at home, and get that conversation going about getting the borders open. I know there are thousands and thousands of businesses across our country who rely almost solely on international visitors. And so all of the programs in the world aren't solving their big problem, and that is they need a way to generate revenue. We also know that so many of our businesses cannot pivot to online solutions the way other industries have. We need people. We are a people industry, and so we will continue to be focused on getting those things done, getting the interprovincial borders, making it easier for Canadians to travel within Canada, and getting the international borders open. And that's the focus of our conversations from now to the end of the year. Absolutely.
Great, thanks. Marsha, we've got a question that came in from the audience, and it's kind of a trend we're seeing now. And the question is, to encourage a more sustainable tourism model, will sustainable destination planning be supported and promoted as a new way to do tourism? And more specifically, are there organizations or certifications that would be supported to lead the sustainable tourism revolution?
Wow, that's a big one. And it's certainly, in general, I would say aligned with how we will be approaching destination development work. And this isn't something that you can turn on as a marketing gimmick, if you will. There has to be genuine change in our industry to how we become a more sustainable industry. And when I use the term sustainable, I'm really talking about the three pillars of sustainability, not merely the environmental pillar. Sociocultural and economic sustainability are equally important for you to have a thriving industry. And all of those elements in trying to generate a new way of building competitiveness is the approach that we'll be taking over the next few years. There are a number of international touch points, I would say, not the least of which, of course, is the United Nations SDGs. But we see many different, filters that are now being used, and we're working very closely with Stats Canada, who is in the midst of all of those conversations with the United Nations, and a very well-respected statistical agency in that milieu, to define what those yardsticks will look like for Canada. So it's a work in progress, and we'll have more to say on this in the coming year, but because it's a new area of responsibility for us, it's going to take a while to get the wheels on and turning quickly.
Excellent. Yeah, better to do it right from the start. We're almost running out of time, but there's this one question I think is super important for some of our audience. And as you know, Beth, students are a huge part of our workforce. So what messaging are we putting out there for students right now? Like the ones that are graduating, the ones that are looking for an entry-level job within the industry? Should we encourage more people to get into tourism? Like, what are we telling these young tourism executives of the future?
Well, I've had the pleasure of speaking with a number of classes at the post-secondary level over the past year. And the message that I'm sending them is Don't give up on this sector. We are an industry that that values all of them. We are an industry that has lost 500,000 people, and we probably have lost, the ripple effect of that loss is probably greater because we've probably lost a number of them to other industries because they had to continue to pay the bills, continue to feed their families. And so I would say keep with us. This never before have we needed new ideas, bright minds, energy, enthusiasm, and that's what these new graduates will bring to our industry. And so I encourage them all to not give up on us.
Great. Well, we're coming to the top of the hour. So merci Marsha, merci Beth. De la part de Destination Canada et de TIAC, merci d'être avec nous aujourd'hui. Thanks for all being with us today. Please make sure you go to both those sites to get more information on all the different programs and what's coming up and plans. If we didn't answer your question, please send it in to TIAC and we'll make sure to get back to you. As well, if you haven't written your letter to Parliament, please go to tourismcounts.ca. Get your letter in. It's super important. It's got to get in before the 19th. And we'll continue both as Destination Canada and TIAC to work diligently for our industry and make sure that the next steps are recovery steps for all of us. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. And thanks again for joining us.